Today, let's talk about the news from Tianshui, Gansu, where hundreds of kids at Peishan kindergarten were found with high blood lead levels. Coincidentally, just this afternoon, the local joint investigation team released a report. It says that kitchen staff at the kindergarten asked the principal for permission to buy colored food dyes online. The dyes contained lead. They diluted them and used them to make things like corn sausages and tricolor date cakes for the kids. So now the mystery that's been bothering everyone for over a week, what caused the lead poisoning, seems to be solved. We've found the source. But after reading the report, I feel like a lot of key details are vague. Some important issues seem to be avoided on purpose. So today, let's take a closer look at this news and go through what the report actually says.
我是天水麦积区培新幼儿园受害小孩的家长，今天在医院给孩子检查的结果是230多。我不知道230多意味着什么啊？有懂行的专业的可以说一说。
The kindergarten where this happened is called Peishan Kindergarten, located in Maiji District, Tianshui, Gansu Province. The owner's name is Li Huifang, and she has a relative named Zhu Jinglin. Li Huifang has been investing in kindergartens since 2009 and currently owns 4 of them. This particular kindergarten, Peishan, started enrolling students in August 2022. According to reports, the school has more than 260 children divided into 3 levels: big, middle, and small classes. Each class has about 30 children. After the spring semester this year, some parents began to notice that something was off with their kids. One parent, for example, noticed that their child, who normally had a strong appetite and could eat 10 dumplings in one sitting, suddenly only ate 3 or 4 and didn't want more. The child also cried easily and had frequent diarrhea. At first, parents didn't pay much attention. They took their kids to the hospital, thinking it was just a common stomach problem. Doctors treated it as a digestive issue, but the symptoms didn't go away. This made some parents start to question things. Soon, one parent found that their child's condition had become more serious. The kid's gums had turned black. I saw the picture myself, and it really was frightening. That parent felt something was clearly wrong. So they kept taking their child to different hospitals. Eventually, in May or June, they got confirmation. Their child had a dangerously high blood lead level. Since most of these parents' kids attended the same kindergarten, the news spread quickly. After one family got their child tested, others followed. More and more parents found the same problem: elevated blood lead levels. By July 1st, the parents couldn't stay silent anymore. They decided to report it. On that day, they called the Market Supervision Bureau to report concerns about the school cafeteria. And they also reported it to the police. Some even suspected intentional poisoning. The kindergarten has its own cafeteria with 2 main chefs and 2 assistants. The kids eat all 3 meals at school. Parents who had visited the kitchen before said it looked okay. The food was colorful and the kids loved it. No one suspected anything was wrong. The monthly meal fee was 360 yuan, which seemed reasonable, so most kids ate all their meals at school. That's why many parents suspected the problem came from the food. On July 1st, after getting the reports, the police arrived at the kindergarten and sealed off the site. According to national regulations, school kitchens must keep samples of all food served in the past 48 hours, in case of any problems. These samples were preserved and collected for testing. They also took environmental samples on site. It's said that on the same day, some teachers and a few students were sent for medical checkups. The next day, the school began organizing full health checks for students, class by class. Once the news broke, parents were in shock and outrage. You can imagine how scared they must have felt. These days, with birth rates so low, parents who do have children tend to cherish them more than ever. Most people aren't even having kids anymore, right? So for those who do, every child is precious. Now think about it. After going through all the trouble to raise a child, they finally get them into this kindergarten. And Peishan Kindergarten isn't cheap. It's a private school. And tuition alone costs 12,000 yuan a year. There's also a 3,500 yuan care fee. Add in the meal fees, and it totals around 20,000 yuan per year. In a city like Tianshui, Gansu, spending 20,000 yuan a year on preschool is no small thing. That puts it in the relatively high-end range among private kindergartens. Parents were willing to pay this much because they believed their child would be well taken care of. But in the end, their child got lead poisoning from eating food at school. And lead poisoning isn't the same as typical food poisoning. Why? Because it can affect a child's brain development. According to experts, if a child's blood lead level reaches 300 to 400 micrograms per liter, their IQ can drop by 7 points. What does that mean? A normal IQ is about 100. If a child doesn't receive treatment, they lose 7 IQ points just from lead exposure. That's essentially becoming cognitively impaired. Even with active treatment, they might only recover 2 or 3 points. That still means permanent loss. Lead poisoning doesn't just slow down physical growth, it harms brain development in ways that can't be reversed. So of course, the parents were terrified. That same afternoon, government departments called a meeting with the parents. I saw photos from the meeting. Officials were seated in a row at the front, and the parents were sitting below. There were police officers standing nearby, watching the crowd closely. At the very start, the officials made it clear, no audio recording, no video recording. Police were on site to enforce that. If anyone tried to record or film, they'd be stopped immediately. During the meeting, officials gave a summary of their findings. They said they tested the kindergarten's water, both tap water and bottled water, and found no issues. Environmental testing and soil samples also showed no problems. As for the food served in the cafeteria, most samples came back clean. But there were 2 exceptions. The first was a corn sausage, a kind of sausage wrapped in cornmeal. The second was a 3-color jujube cake. These 2 food items were found to contain illegal food additives. On July 3rd, local authorities issued an official notice stating that illegal additives had been used in those foods. Beyond that, the announcement included standard government language, that officials were taking the case very seriously and that efforts were being made to calm the public. They even said that overall the public mood was stable. But let's be honest, how could any parent feel emotionally stable under these circumstances? If you were in their shoes, wouldn't you be breaking down? I think most people would. Around July 3rd, the kids' medical test results also started coming out. But here again, the process was questionable. It wasn't that the test data itself was wrong, but the way it was shared with parents was not normal. First of all, they didn't give parents their children's actual test reports. Because the testing was organized in groups, parents were only told the results verbally. A teacher or staff member would inform you of your child's lead level. But you got no physical or digital report to take home. After the results were released, officials said that most children were within the normal range. But in one media report, I saw a screenshot of a message that had been sent to parents through their phones showing the blood lead test summary. In total, 267 children had their blood tested. Out of those, 223 had lead levels below 100 micrograms per liter. Now, according to Chinese law, that's considered normal. 100 micrograms is the legal upper limit for children. But in reality, international health organizations like the WHO and the US CDC recommend a much lower threshold, just 30 micrograms. Because the truth is, once lead enters the body, there's no such thing as a safe amount. Even a small amount can cause harm, especially in children. So our national standard of 100 micrograms is already quite high compared to global recommendations. According to the test summary, 223 children were below 100 micrograms, 31 were between 100 and 199, 7 were in the 200 to 250 range, 4 were between 250 and 385/450, and 2 children had levels above 450. On paper, it didn't seem too bad. Only around 40 children had elevated levels, which is just under 20% of the total. It made the whole thing seem less serious, like the problem was limited and under control. But a lot of parents didn't buy it. They felt the numbers weren't right, or at least didn't reflect the full situation. So some of them decided to take their kids out of town for retesting. Now, if you look at a map, Tianshui is much closer to Lanzhou, the capital of Gansu province. But none of the parents chose to go there. Instead, they all went to Xi'an, which is farther away. Why did they do that? It's pretty obvious. They didn't trust the testing process in Gansu. Tianshui and Lanzhou are in the same province, and parents were worried that local hospitals might be protecting each other, giving results that downplayed the problem. If one city said it was normal, the next might say the same, so they chose to go out of province. Parents packed their bags and rushed overnight to Xi'an. Their destination was Xi'an Central Hospital, which is the designated hospital for occupational disease testing in Shanxi province. This hospital has experience in handling blood lead tests, and it's seen as more independent and reliable. But when hundreds of anxious parents showed up all at once, the hospital was flooded. I saw photos online. It was packed wall to wall with parents crowding into the hallways, waiting desperately for their turn to get their children tested. It's said that Xi'an Central Hospital could only process 50 blood lead tests per day. If it went over 50, they couldn't manage it. The parents were extremely anxious. They all came here to get their children tested. They had no choice. Since they didn't trust Gansu, they could only rely on other province. On July 6th, the test results came out. A total of 74 reports were released. Among the 74 test reports, only 4 were normal. And these 4 are quite interesting. Listen closely. 2 of them were from another kindergarten, also invested by Li Huifang. That kindergarten is called Weibei Kindergarten, located about 1,000 meters away from Peishin. It's not the same school. These 2 kids had normal blood lead levels. The other 2 were sisters. They were supposed to attend Peishin, but hadn't officially started yet. Their results were also normal. The remaining 70 reports all showed abnormal lead levels, and all 70 were from children currently attending Peishin kindergarten. Among these 70, most results were in the 200 to 400 micrograms per liter range. That's very different from what local officials said earlier. Locally, they claimed only 11 kids were in the 200 to 400 range. But now, from the Xi'an Central Hospital results, most of these 70 children fall right in that range.
下面这个天水那边给的数据是143，然后我们家孩子是300。上面这个天水那边给的数据是19.44，但是还要比我们家孩子高出来的352。现在这2个孩子现在都住院治疗了。
The highest reading was 528 micrograms. It was a 5-year-old girl. It's said that when her mother heard the result, she fainted on the spot. I saw the video online. Her mother was crying and speaking through tears.
我的孩子生下来8斤1两，很健康，各项指标都正常。从上幼儿园到现在一次医院都没住过。至于他的赔偿什么的，我现在都不想，我只想我要我的孩子健康。
For many parents in China, good health has become something of a luxury. Even when you spend a lot of money to send your child to a kindergarten that's more expensive than others, one that looks like a fancy, elite school, your child can still end up with lead poisoning. Your child could lose 7 IQ points during their early development. Just think how hopeless the parents must have felt. One mother reportedly fainted on the spot and had to be taken away by ambulance. And what did the local government do? They sent staff to Xi'an Central Hospital to persuade the parents to return to Tianshui for treatment.
我家的娃已经出现身体不舒服。领导一会儿接待你可以吧？接待我。行吧，你说
一个接待是全部的家长，不是一个人。
说话要不那个啥呀？我们要给你看的不是你们的孩子，知道吗？你们让开，你们让开，肯定是你们的孩子。让开，好等。让开，我听不懂，为啥要等？我们家的娃，你们等，我们家的娃，让开，我有什么怎么搞我们？
咱们继续，不要拍照。
你管我？为啥不让拍照？
为啥不让拍啊？为啥不能拍？
为啥不能拍啊？为啥不能拍？这个理由，每一个娃都是。
That's what they did. But everyone knows the 74 test reports released on July 6th were only part of the picture. We still don't know how many total tests were actually done at Xi'an Central Hospital. That was just one batch. And what about Gansu's Tianshui? It said that the local authorities also set up a special blood lead testing channel. A reporter from the paper went there to investigate. At the local hospital, they were told that if you wanted to get a blood lead test, there was a special testing section set up in the building. But it was only open to children from the 4 kindergartens owned by Li Huifang. No one else. If your child went to a different kindergarten, they wouldn't test them. Even if you offered to pay, they would still say no. The reporter asked, why? What if the issue isn't limited to just these 4 kindergartens? The investigation isn't even finished. What if the source of contamination isn't just food? What if it's environmental? If it's something in the environment, then kids from other kindergartens could be affected too. But only kids from those 4 kindergartens were allowed to be tested. Even graduates from those schools weren't allowed. This is what the authorities in Tianshui did. So when people say the parents don't trust the local government, I think they have every reason not to.
他们以前检测部我们迟去了干啥去了？他们检测了吗？如果他们早点发现，会出现这种情况吗？这个数据，这个样本，我们要让他们相关部门也要负责。他们早干嘛去了？
Ever since this story came out, I've been following it closely. From the beginning, I suspected that the source of the lead might be illegal substances added to food additives. Why? Because based on how the events unfolded, it didn't seem like intentional poisoning. Usually, if someone deliberately adds poison, it leads to acute lead poisoning, and the symptoms show up quickly and severely. But in this case, based on media reports, the earliest signs appeared as far back as May of last year. Then, from March this year, when the spring term began, until July, the symptoms gradually worsened over several months. That points more towards slow, long-term accumulation rather than a sudden one-time incident. Poisoning doesn't usually work like that. It hits fast. What this looks like is continuous exposure over time. On July 3rd, the official notice stated that the issue was caused by the illegal use of food additives. That's when I started to suspect it might be lemon yellow pigment. In China, many companies produce lemon yellow, and some of them add lead chromate illegally to boost the color. Lead chromate is a bright, vivid yellow, much stronger than regular lemon yellow. So, when they mix it in, the result looks prettier and more appealing. That's probably why it was used. My reasoning also came from this. If someone had really tried to poison the kids on purpose, the authorities would have solved the case quickly. But think about it. They detained the kindergarten staff on July 1st. Yet by July 7th or 8th, there was still no public conclusion. That kind of delay suggests the investigation was more complicated. But even so, after reading the official report, I realized my original assumptions were too mild. I didn't expect the truth to be this outrageous. People's behavior was even more shameless and cruel than I imagined. Let's look at what the report actually says. It revealed the most critical detail, the source of the lead poisoning. According to the findings, the kitchen staff at Peishan Kindergarten asked the principal for approval to buy colored pigments online. The principal approved it. These pigments were clearly labeled as containing lead and not suitable for food use, but they went ahead anyway, diluted the pigments, and used them in foods like corn sausages and tricolor date cakes. And when they tested those foods, the lead levels were absolutely shocking. One sample contained 1,052 milligrams of lead per kilogram. The other had 1,340 milligrams. For context, China's national food safety limit is just 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. That means both samples exceeded the legal limit by more than 2,000 times. The worst one was over 2,700 times higher. This has nothing to do with regular food additives anymore. This is not just illegal use. It's essentially deliberate poisoning. They use toxic, non-food grade materials to make food for children. So when I saw those numbers, I was honestly shocked. I couldn't understand how someone could be so heartless. But at the same time, I also felt that the report left out some very important details. For example, it didn't say when exactly these colored pigments were purchased online. Was it last month, a year ago, 2 years ago? That matters a lot, because this kindergarten started enrolling students in August 2022. It's now been about 3 years. Some kids have already graduated. I saw online that some graduates, now in 1st or 2nd grade, also went for blood tests because their parents were still worried. And the results showed that their blood lead levels were also elevated. The thing about lead poisoning is, even if you leave the toxic environment, your blood lead level doesn't just drop back to normal quickly. That's because once lead enters the body, especially through the digestive system, it gets stored in the bones. Even if you stop being exposed, the lead in your bones can slowly release back into your bloodstream. So some of these kids have already left the kindergarten and are in elementary school, yet their tests still show high lead levels. That means we have no idea how long this kindergarten had been using these lead-based pigments to make corn sausages. The report doesn't tell us, and it should. It's one of the most basic and crucial facts. Second, what exactly were these pigments meant for? Were they for painting? Were they industrial grade, like the kind used for ceramics? That also hasn't been explained. And that matters because the intended use tells us the level of toxicity. Is it just illegal for food or outright dangerous even in non-food use? We still don't know. That's why I think this situation update, which isn't even a full investigation report yet, is vague on some really critical points. Now, the second issue is this. The report says the other kindergartens owned by the same person all tested fine. That includes Weibai Kindergarten and Sixin Kindergarten. But here's the problem. The food tests were only done on samples saved from the past 48 hours. At Peishin, they happened to still have corn sausage and the tricolour jujube cake in the 48-hour food samples, and those tested positive for lead. But at Weibai, they didn't have those items in the sample window. So does that mean Weibai is in the clear? Not necessarily. Parents from Weibai recalled that their children ate corn sausage too, from November last year through June this year. I saw photos of those sausages. The colours were unnaturally bright. Definitely didn't look like regular food. If the kids ate those sausages months ago, but you're only testing food from the past 48 hours, then of course you won't find anything now. That doesn't prove it was safe. Just that the contaminated food isn't part of the current samples. Since the main scene of the incident was Peishin Kindergarten, and all the other kindergartens are owned by the same person, it's entirely possible that the food was prepared at Peishin and then sent to the others. But because the current testing only covers food samples from the past 48 hours, even if those samples came back clean, it doesn't prove the other schools were safe. The only way to really find out is to carry out full blood lead testing on all the children. And investigators need to ask directly, did any of the people involved send food to the other kindergartens? There's another detail to look at. According to the official notice, 10 people were detained in total. 8 were placed under criminal detention, and 2 were released on bail. Among those 8, some things stand out. According to the parents, each kindergarten kitchen had 4 staff, 2 chefs and 2 assistants. So it's likely all 4 kitchen staff from Peishin were detained. Then there's the principal and the investor, surnamed Zhu and Li, who were also taken. On top of that, the school's food safety officer and the deputy principal in charge of food safety were probably detained too. That gives us 8 people. But what about the other 2 who were released on bail? If the incident was limited to just one kindergarten, it's hard to explain who they could be. However, journalists from the paper went to Tianshui and visited both Weibai and Sixin kindergartens. These schools were still running classes as usual, but the staff at Weibai said their chef was taken away by the police on July 2nd. That means some staff from the other kindergartens were also detained. So in my opinion, this probably shows that the issue extended beyond Peishin. But this wasn't mentioned in the official statement. Why not? Maybe the authorities were afraid that releasing that information would spark widespread panic. Or maybe they thought the exposure was limited, like the kids in other schools only ate the contaminated food once or twice. So it wouldn't have much impact. Either way, they didn't disclose it. The third point is this. The report gave no explanation for why the blood lead test results from Tianshui were so much lower than those from Xi'an. Some parents compared both sets of results and found massive differences, some as much as 10 to 20 times. In Tianshui, the test might show 30 micrograms, but in Xi'an it could be over 400. When asked, local officials said the test results were machine-generated and that they were still reviewing the situation. Some experts said that lead test results can vary between hospitals, and a few parents who tested their kids in multiple hospitals in Jian did notice some differences, like one hospital showed 300, another showed 400. But they also said this kind of variation is usually within 20%. If you're seeing a difference as large as 10 or 20 times, that clearly can't be explained by measurement error alone. So what's the most likely explanation here? In my opinion, the biggest possibility is that from the very beginning, the local authorities deliberately chose to cover up the truth in order to keep things quiet. They didn't want the parents to know the real situation, so they intentionally withheld accurate data. And don't think for a second that a local government in China wouldn't do such a thing. In many places, local officials routinely take measures like this to minimize the perceived severity of public incidents. This is not new. Remember that case in Shanghai years ago? There was a lead processing factory where employees had their blood lead levels tested regularly. They always showed normal levels, something like 18 micrograms, because they wore protective gear. But one of the workers later found out that his child had lead poisoning. That didn't make sense. So he went to another hospital for testing and found that his own blood lead level was actually several hundred micrograms. What does that mean? It means the factory's original testing had deliberately hidden the real results. So in the case of Gansu's Tianshui, is it possible the same kind of cover-up happened? I think the chances are very high that they intentionally hid the truth, specifically to prevent the parents from knowing what was really going on. And that's what makes this so serious. Something went terribly wrong. And instead of informing the families, they forced them to travel across provinces to find out the truth. Only after going all the way to Xi'an did parents finally get the real results. That's the third major point. Now let's talk about the fourth. Personally, I think both the kindergarten owner and the kitchen staff acted out of sheer ignorance. And I don't use that word lightly. What I mean is, they had absolutely no understanding of the rules and standards that apply to food safety. Ever since the melamine scandal, and even earlier cases like the Sudan red dye incident, China has taken a tough stance on illegal food additives. These things have been all over the news for years. So as a kindergarten operator, an investor, or even just a kitchen worker preparing meals for children, how could you not know that non-approved food additives are strictly forbidden? How could you not know that if it isn't officially certified as a food-grade ingredient, you simply cannot use it? And let's not forget, police said they found the colored pigments hidden on site on July 3rd. The packaging clearly stated that the product contained lead and was not for consumption, yet they still used it in food for kids. If that's not ignorance, I don't know what is. I truly don't believe they meant to poison anyone. I think they genuinely didn't understand how dangerous it was to use lead-containing pigments in food. But then that leads to another question. How could people this ignorant be allowed to run a kindergarten? How could people like this be allowed to work in a school kitchen, cooking for children?
愿你时常文我怀若谷，腹有诗书气自华。
迎刃而解，所有努力开花结果。
考场是舞台，笔墨是翅膀。愿你自信飞扬，妙笔生花。
So what does this really show? It shows that in our country, becoming a kindergarten operator is something that basically requires no real qualifications. As long as you're willing to invest money, as long as you're able to spend, you can do it. And in fact, all the so-called supervision systems, all the regulations and management guidelines are basically just there on paper. The Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China does have clear rules when it comes to centralized food services in schools, including kindergartens. But those rules? In this case, they had absolutely no effect. Many kindergartens spend their money building fancy facilities, pushing things like bilingual education, buying toys, decorating everything beautifully. But when it comes to the things that truly matter, things that concern a child's life and health, there's no defense at all. This is the reality of Chinese society today. Now, the fifth point, if we look at this from a wider angle, there's a bigger issue behind it all. I spoke with a food safety expert, and he had a question he couldn't quite understand. He said, why would someone go out of their way to buy industrial pigment? There are legal food-grade color additives available. They can color corn products just fine, and they don't cost that much more. I told him, did you miss the detail? They used it after diluting it. It might have been diluted 100 times, or maybe 50 times. After that kind of dilution, it still made the corn sausages look brightly colored. And he asked again, but how much money would they even save? Realistically, it might have saved the kitchen just 200, maybe 300, or at most 500 yuan a month. And yet, just to save a few hundred yuan, They let children pay such a heavy price with their health and possibly their lives. But this isn't just about money. There's context here. Right now in China, the competition among kindergartens is absolutely brutal. Why is that? Because everyone knows that in recent years, China's birth rate has dropped dramatically. From 2016 to 2024, the number of newborns has fallen by nearly half. In 2016, there were still about 16 million births. But by 2024, the number has reportedly dropped below 8 million. In less than 10 years, it's been cut in half. So what happens to kindergartens? They face huge pressure in recruiting students. According to reports, from 2020 to 2023, a total of 29,000 private kindergartens were shut down across China. That means these private kindergartens are now stuck between survival and closure. And in order to survive, they're forced to count every cent and cut every possible cost. I looked into the numbers. A child's monthly meal fee is 360 yuan. That's for 3 meals a day at the kindergarten. If you break that down, that means each meal only costs about 6 yuan. Now ask yourself, what kind of food can a child get for 6 yuan? So to save a few hundred yuan a month, from the investor's point of view, maybe it seems worth it. Maybe they think it's a necessary move. But the result? In one kindergarten, hundreds of children ended up with elevated lead levels. So perhaps this incident isn't just a local tragedy. It might be a reflection of the changing times. With the sharp drop in birth rates and the worsening survival conditions of kindergartens, some people are forced to take reckless risks just to keep going. Of course, saying all this doesn't mean we're trying to defend the people responsible. They've already broken the law. What's waiting for them will be serious legal consequences. But maybe what this case shows is just the tip of the iceberg, a sign of deeper problems in our society driven by rapid change. Isn't that something worth thinking about? That's all I wanted to share today. Thank you.
我是天水麦积区培新幼儿园受害小孩的家长。今天在医院给孩子检查的结果是230多。我不知道230多意味着什么啊？有懂行的专业的可以说一说。
149。没上去了多少？8.7。528。
我的孩子生下来8斤1两，很健康，各项指标都正常。从上幼儿园到现在一次医院都没住过。至于他的赔偿什么的，我现在都不想，我只想我要我的孩子健康。
我家的娃已经出现身体不舒服。领导一会儿接待你可以吗？接待我。是吧？你说一下。
你一个接待是全部的家长，不是一个人。
说话要不那个啥，要不那个看的不是你们的孩子，知道吗？还有，你们让开，让开，不是你们的孩子，看我的孩子。让开，好点。让开，我给不到，为啥要让？我们家的娃已经出现身体不舒服，我家的娃已经让开，我有什么咱们找我们？不行，就在这说。
愿你聪藏文墨怀若谷，腹有诗书气自华。
迎刃而解，所有努力开花结果。
考场是舞台，笔墨是翅膀，愿你自信飞扬，吊笔生花。